Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Vibhuti Jain. I'm the Project Finance Advisor at Power Africa. I think many of you in the room are familiar with Power Africa. We're a US government-led energy investment initiative in sub-Saharan Africa. Just by way of brief background, we were launched about 3 years ago by President Obama during a state visit. And we have twin goals, both of which are very relevant for this current panel. The first is to increase electricity generation in sub-Saharan Africa by adding 30,000 megawatts of cleaner generation of capacity in the region. And the second is to increase energy access by adding 60 million new connections. I think for those in the room who are familiar with the agency, I don't want to get into the details about how we work, but basically this panel, in which we're going to hear from government officials as well as EPC contractors and developers on what their priorities are and what they're excited about seeing the private sector assist with as they think about their long-term goals. I think one of the reasons why that's so relevant for Power Africa is we're essentially a consortium of 12 different US government agencies, ranging from our US government DFI, the Overseas Private Investment Corporation, to our ECA, EXIM, to the Department of Energy, to USAID, where my office is headquartered, as well as several others. And we also are comprised of many multilateral partners like the AFDB, the World Bank Group, including the IFC, and various African and European governments. And finally, we have over 120 private sector partners. And what we're trying to do is create a consortium where we can leverage the different expertise and competitive advantages of each of our members to help push projects across the finish line and reach financial close. So listening to our panelists today will help inform our resource allocation decisions and our own priorities, and hopefully it will help those in the audience as well. And with that, I'm being told that we're running a little short on time, but we would like to have some question and answers for the panel. So does anyone in the audience have any questions that you'd like to ask the panelists?
Putting you on the spot in terms of the being in the group capital projects. In terms of the innovations that we're looking at, one of the projects, the pebble bed modular reactor, probably maybe one left behind, but is there any room, apart from the discussions and the debates that the nuclear debate is taking, maybe for and against in South Africa, is there any room perhaps for that lovely innovation in pebble bed modular reactor technology?
Thank you. Yes, to answer you direct, there is a room. I think very soon we'll be talking about the PBMR. As you know that at some stage there were a lot of discussion around it, and then eventually the team that were researching the PBMR get dismantled. But we as EXCO, we have debated it lengthy, and we decided that the PBMR, we need to investigate it further. It will definitely in the near future come back. I think parallel to the nuclear development, we're gonna do PBMR as well. From the development point of view, we feel very strong that we shouldn't have stopped developing the PBMR, hence we brought it back, and you'll see it in the platforms very soon.
I think we have another question in the back.
Hi, it's Alex Caton from Infraco. Question to one of the panelists from MBET. And it was just to ask, it sounds a very impressive and interesting list of PV projects you have in your portfolio, in your pipeline in Nigeria. And the question was simply, we've looked at several, and we continue to look at PV in Nigeria, but it would be interesting to understand how you see getting the best value for money from this long pipeline. the best value for money for your customer, what kind of process do you anticipate to bring those projects to market? Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. When you look at Nigeria, before now, as far as say 2012, 2013, we actually had a policy that allows for unsolicited discussions where developers come to the country to develop their projects, and they have a one-on-one negotiations with the off-taker to arrive at a price. But the country is trying to move away from that. Very soon, we'll go into a competitive bidding. But the important thing is that we need to look for a way to, there's actually two different schools of thoughts here. The government is thinking of either they might want to do a form of closed bidding within this 15 project that we have now, or decide to agree on a tariff and close those deals. But definitely later in the year, there's a plan to go into competitive bidding, because that's really the best way for you to get the best price that the consumers will have the right value for. So just to reiterate, we're trying to go the way of South Africa. Hopefully we'll get there.
Thanks, and I think we have one last question in the back over there.
Thank you so much. It's Pancho Ndabella here. I just have a question for the gentleman from ESCOM, and probably Isaki can also step into this one. It's really around storage, which you raised, and in terms of what you guys are looking at. We today actually have viable storage opportunity or storage technology, which is basically from a renewable energy perspective, that is concentrated solar power. Concentrated solar power can provide energy for peaking power, for baseload power, as well as for mid-merit. And that's why there's a lot of the developments in the Northern Cape that are actually factoring on that. And what is simple does, it also means that you can put more into the grid, all the other renewables that are intermittent. So for me, the question that I have for you is that ESCOM was looking at its own concentrated solar power, which was meant to operate as a base loader with about 12 hours of storage. Is that still on the cards, or that's not on the cards? And second part of the question is the fact that given what has happened to renewables in South Africa, and given the fact that, with concentrated solar power also there's an opportunity for industrialization and localization, is there a room to actually see more of that? And the last part of my question deals with your transmission plans. Is that obviously there needs to be a way how your plans must move ahead of all the other projects that people are developing, because without the grid, you can't evacuate anything. So my question to you is, what is ESCOM doing to actually expedite the grid infrastructure sooner rather than later? Thank you for that.
Yeah, I think I'll go first before Saki. Yes, you're 100% right. The issue of the storage is still a viable option. Right now, in terms of the allocation from DOE, we are allocated as ESCOM the concentrated solar power to install, but the affordability is an issue. The technology that is there is very expensive, and in our view, is that there still needs to be developed so that it becomes a viable option. We've been investigating it for some time right now. It's still in the cards, with the hope that from the research and development, we'll probably come up with a technology that will be viable. I think mainly the challenge is going to be the affordability right now to be able to carry on with the current concentrated solar power technology that is currently proposed. And I think once we resolve the issue of the finance and cost and the affordability, then we can be able to expand on that. In terms of the transmission lines, you're 100% right. Hence, I've mentioned that in the near future, most of the projects that we'll be concentrating on is the transmission lines. But we're not only going to concentrate on the transmission lines, we're also going to concentrate on the distribution infrastructure, because some of the renewables gets connected to distribution lines as opposed to the transmission line. And it becomes very critical for us from the ESCOM point of view to be up to speed, because at the end of the day, we need to know who has connected, who has not connected, so that we can be able to have a clear oversight in terms of how to manage that moving forward. So both the transmission and the distribution infrastructure needs to be looked at, and we've already started to map the way forward from the ESCOM point of view in terms of how we're going to deal with the transmission infrastructure as well as the distribution infrastructure. From the transmission infrastructure point of view, we also need to comply with the N-1 compliance, that is the grid code. So it's very important that we move very fast. But having said that, we haven't stopped. We've been installing and strengthening some of our lines. So we just need to intensify and move a bit faster. For example, for the past financial year, we have connected more than 345 kilometers of line. Some is strengthening, some is new lines. And this year we've got a target that we also need to meet. So it's a matter of us, intensifying and fast-tracking some of these projects.
Just quickly, the commercial bank IPP view on CSPs. We see CSP as a definite role to play. If they can dispatch during peak hours, you should compare the cost of CSP with peaking power cost. And if they then can dispatch during the day at normal PV, there's definitely an economic case for it to be made. Of course, you have to balance your grid and see what is your peaking requirements, because if you dispatch outside of those hours, then that CSP is expensive. But we can certainly refine that number. I foresee that CSP has a definite life in South Africa and a role to play. Furthermore, CSP stabilizes the grid. If we look at the Uppington area, for instance, where we have a lot of PV developments and now a few CSPs, Eskom can call on those CSPs and the storage whenever there's grid instability. If you have a sudden cloud moving in, I think CSPs can play a significant role in assisting grid stability.
Okay, thank you everyone. And I think we're out of time. So if you have more questions for the panelists, I encourage you to ask them during our next break. Thank you.
Doing business in Africa. You can't afford to be without Africa Investor.